Hey guys, tonight we start our story far from any battlefield, somewhere deeper, colder, and quieter. Imagine this, a forest in Eastern Europe, late in the war, with snow that falls so softly it doesn't crunch under your boots. The trees are dark and tall, like they're holding their breath, and beneath them, concrete, long, low structures with metal doors that don't seem to lead anywhere. The air smells like wet pine and old oil. You're not here on orders. You're just listening, because inside these hidden places, whispers live, and you probably won't survive this. Not because something's going to leap out at you, but because it's hard to come back from the things you learn here. Even the ground feels like it's keeping secrets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step toward one of the concrete buildings. There's no sign, no number, just the heavy scent of rust and secrecy. A small vent above the door exhales warm air. You're not alone here, even if it feels that way. This is the kind of place where files used to be typed on thin paper and then locked in steel drawers. The kind of place where names don't matter, only results. Welcome to the edge of Nazi Germany's most whispered about experiments. Mainstream fact. As the war dragged on and Hitler's regime grew more desperate, various SS-led factions began pouring resources into miracle weapons, secret technologies, and fringe science projects. Some were genuine efforts, others pure fantasy. But all were shielded by layers of classification, isolation, and myth. You step through the door. It swings open too easily, too silently. Inside, flickering lights, metal tables, and walls covered in faded diagrams. Some are clearly rocket schematics. Others, not so much. Spirals, symbols, a sketch of a bell-shaped machine with electrical coils running down its sides. You know what this is, Die Glocke, the bell, and no one agrees what it did. Quirky tidbit, some post-war theories claim Die Glocke could manipulate gravity, bend time, or punch a hole through dimensions. Others say it was a radiation-based propulsion experiment, more fantasy than function. Still others suggest it never existed at all, and was a deliberate plant to confuse Allied spies. Historians still argue whether Die Glocke was a real object, a code name, or a psychological smokescreen. But here's the thing. Multiple post-war testimonies, none confirmed, describe a device that hummed like bees and glowed violet before it suddenly stopped working. Or maybe started working in a way no one expected. You step closer to one of the machines in the room. Real or replicated, it's impossible to tell. The air around it hums. Not electrically, more like memory. You look down. A metal plate on the floor bears faint letters. Polish, then German. Then something that might be Latin, but isn't. You move on. The hallway splits. Left goes deeper underground. Right leads toward an open-air platform with snow drifting in through broken glass. You choose left. Because of course you do. Down the corridor. The walls narrow. Someone scratched equations into the paint. You can't read them, but they don't look like physics. They look like music. And then you hear it, a low, slow vibration, like a machine exhaling in reverse. You pause. The lights flicker, or maybe your memory does, because this place doesn't follow rules. Time folds differently down here. You reach a sealed door, marked only with a triangle and a spiral. You don't open it. Some stories need to stay behind closed doors. Instead, you turn and walk slowly back up the hallway, snowlight returning, breath visible in the air now. There are rumors. There are fragments. And tonight, you will walk through them all, not to solve them, just to sit with them. Because some experiments never left the lab. They just changed form and kept whispering. The snow crunches gently under your boots now, just enough to remind you that you're no longer in the bunker, though the memory of that humming sound still buzzes faintly in your bones. You're walking along a narrow mountain trail. The wind is soft, almost respectful, like it knows you're following something that was never meant to be found. To your left, a ridge of jagged trees. To your right, an overlook where the fog clings like old linen. And ahead, another structure, not a full facility this time, just a wide, circular concrete slab with steel bolts dotting its surface. It's cracked in a few places, weathered, but still humming, faintly, if you press your ear to the ground. Welcome to the mystery of Die Glocke, the bell. Mainstream fact: Die Glocke comes from the testimony of a man named Igor Witkowski, a Polish journalist who in the 1990s claimed to have seen transcripts from post-war interrogations of SS officers. According to these claims, the bell was an object developed at a site called Der Riese, the Giant, a sprawling underground complex in what is now modern-day Poland. The bell allegedly emitted strong radiation, required 2 scientists to die during tests, and was shaped naturally like a giant bell. No photos, no recovered parts, no confirmed records, just a name, a shape. And the fact that it was so secret, even the people working near it didn't ask questions. You walk slowly across the platform. The cracked cement feels strange beneath your feet, like it remembers something. On the far side, there's a rusted-out frame of scaffolding. Some say the bell was chained here during tests. Others claim it levitated, or spun, or disappeared. Quirky tidbit: conspiracy lore says the bell glowed purple and was filled with a mercury-like substance called Zerum 525. That name sounds like something out of a science fiction script, and probably is. But dozens of forums and old declassified reports mention liquid metal experiments. Some even claim the bell was moved to South America after the war, or Antarctica, or another dimension entirely. Historians still argue whether the bell was a real experiment, a cover for nuclear weapons research, or simply Cold War disinformation. But the myth persists because the details are just specific enough to feel possible, and just strange enough to remain unverifiable. You kneel and run your hand along the edge of the platform. A bolt turns gently under your fingertips, like it's still in use. Something in you wants to believe there's a hatch nearby, a ladder leading down, more tunnels, but there's nothing, just wind, and a ring of trees. You imagine the scene here 80 years ago. Cold technicians in thick gloves, scribbling data as a massive object begins to vibrate. Guards posted at the tree line, lights dimming across the valley. And then, silence. Or, not silence, absence. No one really agrees what happened next. Some say it never worked. Others say it worked too well. There's even a theory that Die Glocke was the origin of the Philadelphia experiment, the American naval myth about ships vanishing and teleporting. The timelines don't match, but the idea of machines folding, space-time is strangely persistent. You stand again. The fog lifts slightly, revealing more of the mountains, jagged and solemn. You start walking again. The trail takes you past old fence posts, rusted but still standing. Something about that makes you smile. Secrets don't rot. They just rust quietly in the snow. Up ahead, the trees part slightly to reveal a signpost. Wooden, faded, and barely legible. But you can still make out the words: Wehrmacht Test Zone, Zugang. Verboten, access forbidden. Of course, you step over the low fence and walk into the pines. You're not hunting proof anymore. You're following echoes, and the next one is getting louder. Because if the bell was real, then someone built it, and not all. Builders survived. The pine trees close in around you, tall and quiet, their branches whispering in the breeze like pages of a book too brittle to turn. The air is colder here. Close, still, thick with old breath. You step carefully over a moss-covered log, your boots sinking slightly into the forest floor. And there it is, almost hidden between the trees. Another bunker, this one low to the ground and half swallowed by earth. You duck inside. The darkness greets you like a familiar friend. Inside, it's cool and dry. The ceiling is low, the walls concrete and stained. Old metal filing cabinets line one wall, most pried open long ago. A narrow table stands in the center, its surface scratched with diagrams and tiny, indecipherable notes in German cursive. No one here now. But you feel the room's memory curling around your ankles. This was a laboratory, or something that wanted to be one. Mainstream fact: during the latter half of World War II, the Nazis were desperate for technological supremacy. Research facilities sprouted across the Third Reich, some official, others secret, and some so compartmentalized that even top officers didn't know what their neighbors were building. Scientists from across occupied Europe were forced or recruited into service, working on everything from rockets to acoustics to medicine. The line between science and obsession blurred quickly. You sift through the notes on the table. One page has a neat drawing of a human brain connected to a grid of copper wires. Another shows a tower with runes carved into its base. Mathematical, mystical, both. Quirky tidbit. Some researchers in the Nazi SS were tasked with exploring alternative science, what modern historians would call pseudoscience or fringe theory. This included things like telepathy, vibrational healing, and even dream control. One unit allegedly experimented with forced dreaming under LSD-like compounds, trying to extract visual blueprints from the subconscious. No one knows if it worked, but the files exist, some half-redacted, some never found again. Historians still argue whether these experiments were genuine pursuits, cruel diversions, or simply propaganda meant to suggest Germany was years ahead of Allied science. But what's chilling is how normal these rooms were. No glowing runes or mad machinery. Just quiet, tidy desks, and a silence too focused to ignore. You walk past the table and notice a narrow doorway on the far side of the room. It opens into a hallway, lit by the faintest shaft of daylight from a high, grated window. Down this hall are a series of small rooms. Not cells, not offices, something in between. Each one has a small bunk, a clipboard, and a microphone hanging from the ceiling, not to listen in, to record. Test subjects, volunteers. You wonder how many languages were spoken in these rooms. How many questions asked, how many answers were silenced. At the far end of the corridor, one door is different. Brass-plated, reinforced, and sealed with a crank lock. On the wall next to it, someone has carved a spiral into the paint. Not drawn, carved. You reach out and touch the cold brass. It doesn't open. But something in you doesn't want it to. Not tonight. You back away and head toward the exit. The air in the main lab feels lighter now, though the silence still hums with unsaid things. You step back outside into the forest. The light has changed. Softer, dimmer, golden. A gentle wind stirs the pine needles, brushing your shoulder like a friend, saying, "Let's go." Because this wasn't the only lab, not by a long shot. And the next one, it was designed more like a temple. The wind is different now. It curls through the forest in lazy spirals, picking up pine scent and dust and maybe something older. Path beneath your feet becomes gravel, then stone. And as you round a bend, the trees part like curtains. There it is. Wewelsburg Castle, squat, gray, and too symmetrical to feel like any ordinary fortress. It doesn't sprawl like most castles. It concentrates. A three-winged triangle of stone perched on a low hill in central Germany, once forgotten, now etched into layers of rumor. You step forward, boots echoing faintly against the stone path. The sun rests low behind the battlements, casting the place in bronze. But even in this gentle light, the castle feels focused, like it's watching. Mainstream fact: Wewelsburg was renovated under the direction of Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, starting in the 1930s. He intended the castle to become the ideological center of a new Germanic religion, part war headquarters, part spiritual sanctuary for the SS elite. It featured a round chamber, known as the Obergruppenführersaal, where top commanders would gather under a sunwheel carved into the floor. Below it, a crypt, unfinished, sealed, and full of speculation. You enter through the front gate. Inside, the walls breathe coolness. The halls are wide and clean, the stones quiet beneath your steps. Old murals peek through layers of restoration, Nordic scenes, knightly heroes, runes curling along the ceiling beams like vines. You pass into the central tower. A spiral staircase leads upward toward the famed sunwheel chamber. Quirky tidbit. The 12 dark green granite columns of the Obergruppenführersaal are arranged in a perfect circle, with the black sun symbol in the center, a design later adopted by neo-mystical groups and conspiracy theorists. No clear historical documentation explains the full purpose of the room. Some say it was ceremonial, others call it astrological, and some whisper that it wasn't meant for gatherings at all, but resonance. Historians still argue whether the black sun symbol was an ancient motif repurposed by the Nazis or a complete invention designed to feel ancient. Either way, the effect is unsettling. The room doesn't feel old. It feels timeless, and not in a gentle way. You step into the center of the sunwheel. It's quiet, too quiet, not peaceful, but paused, as if the room is waiting for the right voice to finish a sentence that's been lingering for decades. The acoustics are strange. You say nothing, but your heartbeat echoes slightly. A delay, a lag. You speak a word, just your name, and hear it return to you, stretched. The room remembers. Below this chamber lies the crypt, or what was meant to be a crypt. You follow the stairwell downward into the darkness, guided by weak electric lights and a sense of unearned permission. The crypt is circular, domed, with niches for flames that were never lit. The air is colder here, not just from stone, but from distance. It feels like you've dropped below the surface of reality. No one knows what this space was meant for. Meditation, power, burial. It remains unfinished, a monument to ambition halted by collapse. You stand in the center of the room and close your eyes. Somewhere, above you, a bell is tolling. Not real, just the thought of one. And here, too, is a spiral. On the wall, faintly, scratched in soot or ash. Different hand than before. Same curve. You don't touch it this time. You simply watch. Because the castle is still listening. You ascend slowly. The stones warm again underfoot, as if they've been holding heat in reserve just for this. Outside, the forest waits. You leave the castle behind, but it doesn't quite leave you. You carry a little of its silence with you. Because the next place, it, hums louder than any chamber. There, the silence might kill. You leave the castle behind, the sound of your steps muffled by soft pine needles, and the slow hush of wind returning to its usual patterns. The path dips, then curves eastward. Soon the trees grow sparse, and the ground becomes gritty, coated in gravel and broken roots. The air thickens slightly, like it knows what's coming. You're approaching a site where science was less mystical, but no less unnerving. Reactor tests, uranium cubes, dreams of fire and chain reactions. Welcome to the edge of Germany's nuclear hopes. Mainstream fact. While the United States pursued the Manhattan Project, Germany made its own attempts at nuclear research. Headed by physicists like Werner Heisenberg, Kurt Diebner, and others, the Nazi atomic program was fractured, underfunded, and cloaked in paranoia. One major site was Heigerloch, a cave-like lab beneath a church in southern Germany, where scientists suspended uranium cubes in heavy water, trying to achieve a self-sustaining reaction. You come to the edge of a steep decline. Below, carved directly into the hillside, is the bunker, low, unassuming, with its metal doors removed long ago. You step inside. It's colder here, and it smells like dust and old math. The walls are lined with chalkboards, some wiped clean, others still holding faint outlines of equations that once promised unimaginable energy. On the floor is a metal grid where uranium cubes once hung, suspended by wires like some abstract chandelier of annihilation. You walk past the grid and place a hand on the wall. It hums faintly, or perhaps that's just your imagination, a low-frequency memory of a project too quiet to explode. Quirky tidbit. After the war, Allied forces recovered dozens of small uranium cubes, roughly 2 inches per side, used in Nazi reactor experiments. Some of them were mysteriously labeled, some were unaccounted for. A few were even shipped to the US and ended up in university labs or private collections. Recently, one was found in a drawer in Maryland. No one quite knows how many still exist, or where they've all gone. Historians still argue whether Heisenberg and his team deliberately slowed their progress, unsure whether they wanted Hitler to have the bomb. Others claim they simply lacked the resources and the cohesion that made the Manhattan Project succeed. The truth is murky. The calculations are real. The motivations? Less so. You sit on a nearby bench, the concrete cold beneath you. There's a sense here of things almost achieved, equations nearly solved, silence just a breath away from thunder, and then you hear it. Faint footsteps from deeper in the complex. You follow, slow and curious, though part of you already knows what you'll find. A narrow stairway leads down to a second chamber, this one smaller, warmer. On a desk rests a single page, yellowed with age and damp at the corners. It contains a question, not in German, not in English, just symbols, circles, squares, an unfinished spiral. Again, the language of fear and ambition, of people trying to break the rules of the universe before they understood the cost. You step back. The hum in the wall is gone now. The bunker stills. The silence returns. But it's a different silence than the one in the castle. Less spiritual, more sterile. It hums with equations that remain unproven, and intentions that were never quite confessed. Outside, the daylight has cooled into a pale silver. You walk back out into it, your breath curling upward. The mountains seem further away now, because what you're chasing is no longer on the maps. It's gone deeper. The next place, it never made the history books, but it might have touched the sky. The terrain grows sharper as you climb. Stone gives way to gravel, then to slabs of angled concrete jutting from the hillside like the bones of a giant buried just beneath the surface. The trees thin out. A wind picks up, high and dry, tugging at your collar and whispering in your ears like static from a forgotten radio frequency. Up ahead, nestled in a slope of jagged rock and lichen-covered iron, stands a curved hangar. The roof is partially collapsed, its sides blistered with time. But it's still standing, like it's waiting for one final launch. You step inside and immediately feel smaller, because above you, spanning half the width of the hangar, is the skeletal shell of something that looks wrong, wings too wide, fuselage too short, and a cockpit that's shaped more like a dome than anything meant for human flight. Mainstream fact: during World War II, the Nazis developed a number of radical aircraft designs, including the Horten-Ho 29, a flying wing jet that resembled a UFO long before such shapes entered popular culture. While most of these experiments never reached full production, they captured the imagination of post-war mythmakers. What began as stealth research became something stranger. You walk around the half-built craft, no engines, no insignia. But the word project is stenciled on the wall in faded black paint. And near it, a spiral, drawn in chalk, or something like it. The whispering wind outside dips for a moment, and in the silence, could swear you hear something. Not footsteps, not breathing. A hum, again. Like before, like Die Glocke, quirky tidbit. Some fringe theories suggest Nazi engineers were working on Foo Fighters, small disc-shaped aircraft designed to confuse Allied pilots. Officially both. Sides dismissed such sightings as misidentified flares, weather balloons, or stress hallucinations. But unmarked discs were reported by multiple pilots over France and Germany. No one ever found them, at least not officially. Historians still argue whether these reports were psychological phenomena or misdirection, perhaps even secret tests of early jet propulsion. But the shapes don't lie. Several experimental diagrams found after the war look more like science fiction sketches than blueprints. You lean against the metal frame of the strange aircraft. It's cool beneath your fingertips, smoother than expected. Too smooth. And then your eyes fall to the ground. A small notebook lies under the support strut, water damaged, mold flecked, but intact. You open it gently. Inside, sketches of propulsion coils, spiral-shaped turbine rings, notations in German, Russian, and something that might be Latin. Or a cipher. You flip to the last page. A date, April 19th, 1945. And one word, Abflug, departure. There's no record of any flight that day. But there's also no record of where this aircraft came from. You set the notebook back down, let it rest, let the story breathe again. As you walk toward the exit of the hangar, light leaks through cracks in the roof. The beams catch the edge of the strange ship, giving it a silver halo. You pause and take one last look. It doesn't feel threatening, just unfinished. A story never launched, a whisper never spoken aloud. You exit the hangar into the cold breeze. The mountains ahead flicker briefly in the afternoon light. Below, the forest beckons again, and somewhere down there in the caves below the hills, another secret hums, a deeper one, closer to the bone. The trail turns downward now, and with each step, the air cools further, until your breath returns as mist, and your boots crunch not against forest floor, but against thin layers of frost-covered stone. The trees give way to raw rock, and the ICCR sky shrinks into narrow ribbons of pale gray. Ahead, half hidden behind a curtain of hanging ivy, looms the entrance to something older, a cave, but not a natural one. Cut stone frames its mouth. Reinforced beams line its edges. Faded symbols are etched above the entryway, and you swear, just for a moment, one of them is moving. But it's only a shadow passing across the surface. You step inside. Welcome to the tunnels, to the hollow bones of the mountains, to the place where silence came to work. Mainstream fact: the Nazis built vast underground networks across Europe late in the war, chief among them the Ries complex in what is now Poland. Miles of tunnels carved under the Owl Mountains, reinforced with concrete, and laced with ventilation shafts. What exactly was constructed down here remains unclear. Was it a headquarters, a weapons lab, a vault? The records are incomplete, perhaps deliberately so. You walk deeper. The walls close in slightly, but not enough to feel claustrophobic. There's a strange rhythm to the architecture, like it was designed not just for function, but for something else. Acoustics, resonance, ritual. Each chamber has a different tone when you walk through it. You test this now. Your footstep echoes sharply in one room, then barely at all in the next. Someone knew how sound moved here. Quirky tidbit. Local legends from the Owl Mountains mention that during construction of the tunnels, prisoners and engineers alike began reporting strange headaches, nausea, even hallucinations. Some say the rock was cursed. Others believe certain chambers were tuned, literally, to produce certain mental effects. It could be coincidence, or geology, or something more intentional. Historians still argue whether the Ries complex was ever completed or if it remained an elaborate set of decoys. The Allies never found functional weapons inside, but what they did find were crates, empty, labeled with nothing but numbers, and rooms that looked designed to house something that never arrived, or something that left in time. You pass by one of those rooms now. The doorway is narrow, the floor gently sloped. Inside, the walls are covered with reflective panels, dull now with age but once bright. In the center, a podium. Not a lectern, not a desk. A podium. As if something once stood upon it, something to be looked at or listened to. You step around. The edge. The back wall has a faint outline, like a chalk diagram worn smooth by decades of wind and memory. And there it is again. The spiral. This one larger than the rest. More complete. No letters, just shape. It draws your eye inward. You blink, step back, shake it off, because somewhere deeper in this labyrinth, something is humming again. You move forward, deeper, down a second set of stairs, past what looks like abandoned ventilation machinery, wheels with missing belts, pipes too narrow to serve any industrial purpose. The walls start to glisten, moisture or something older. The floor underfoot turns to metal grating, and the air smells sharp, like battery acid and rain. This is where the records end. This is the part they couldn't explain. The wind doesn't reach here. No birdsong. No branches. Just the weight of things left unfinished or hidden too well. You pause at a fork in the tunnel. To the left, darkness thick as ink. To the right, a faint glow. You follow the glow, because you always do. At the end of the corridor lies a sealed hatch. Cold. Rusted. Still closed, but on it? Faint, scratched into the frame, are initials. Yours. No, but they look familiar, like they could be. You place your hand gently on the surface, and it feels warm. Not dangerous, just waiting. You step back and turn away, because tonight is not for opening things. It's for remembering. You walk out of the tunnel. Slowly, one step at a time, and above you the stars begin to blink awake, as if watching, as if waiting, for someone to whisper the right code. You leave the mountain tunnels behind, the cold air slipping away as the forest reclaims the trail. Pine gives way to birch, then to soft meadows where nothing has been built, or at least not recently. But just beyond the next hill, tucked into the shadows of mossy stones and forgotten border markers, you come across something less concrete. A listening post, not for enemy planes or code breaking, but for the mind, and perhaps something more. The room you enter is low and narrow, like it was built for whispering rather than working. There's no machinery here, just rows of old wooden chairs arranged before a black panel, and in the center, a round metal table with a glass orb mounted at its core. Dust coats everything in a soft, deliberate layer, like the room's been sleeping. You approach the orb. A copper spiral is etched faintly into its surface. Of course it is. Mainstream fact. In the final years of the war, several SS-affiliated divisions, including those associated with the Ahnenerbe, a pseudo-archaeological and occult research institute, dabbled in fringe experiments involving parapsychology. This included attempts to test telepathy, remote viewing, and consciousness projection. Many of these efforts were more pseudoscience than science, but the resources behind them were real and oddly thorough. You sit quietly in one of the chairs. Imagine the experiments here, a subject wired to electrodes, staring into the orb, asked to picture someone hundreds of miles away, then asked what they were doing, or thinking, or hiding. It sounds absurd, until you remember how often reality takes a nap during war. Quirky tidbit. Some stories claim the Nazis attempted to develop a machine capable of recording thoughts visually, translating mental images into shapes, light, or even sound. While there's no proven technology from the era that did this, rumors of a mirror room where people's dreams were projected onto the walls have survived in both Allied intelligence archives and local legend. The truth? Unclear. The fascination? Undeniable. Historians still argue whether these experiments were serious efforts or psychological theater, intended to control subjects, confuse spies, or simply distract higher-ups chasing supernatural shortcuts to victory. The most intriguing part? Some participants later claimed the experiments worked. You stand slowly and approach the orb. Your reflection stares back at you, wobbly, distorted by the curved glass. You try to imagine what they were trying. To find here, a signal, a mind, a map inside the brain. You touch the glass lightly. It's colder than it should be. Behind you, the wind rattles the wooden shutters. A pulse of light flickers faintly across the orb's interior. You blink. Gone. Just the dust. You step back. Your breath fogging the air. It's time to move again. The trail leads you downhill, deeper into a grove of yew trees. Their branches twist in ways that make you question geometry, and you feel it again. The hum, subtle, rhythmic, like a mechanical breath, stretched thin over miles of stone and silence. You come to a small clearing, in the center, a metal box, plain, locked, unlabeled, but you know it's not empty. You don't open it. Because this story is about whispers, not reveals. You kneel beside it, resting one hand on the lid, and for a moment you swear you hear a voice. Not words. Just intent. Just memory. You rise. The forest seems quieter now. Not empty. Just listening. You keep walking. Because ahead there's one more strange page to turn, and it's about a man who looked to the stars. Not for science, but for strategy. The trees part again, slowly this time, as if unsure they want to let you through. The path curves upward along a narrow ridge, the air now crisp with altitude and tinged with the scent of lichen and rust. Somewhere above you, ravens chatter. But down here, the ground is soft. Moss, earth, and buried things. You crest a low rise and find the observatory, not the kind built for stars, for control. It's a squat, circular structure, more bunker than telescope dome, with narrow slits, for windows and a heavy iron door that bears no markings. The stone is pale, weather-smoothed, and ringed with odd carvings. Lines, points, tiny astrological symbols too perfect to be graffiti. You open the door and step into the cold. Mainstream fact. Nazi leadership, particularly Himmler and others, within the SS were deeply invested in astrology, mysticism, and cyclical theories of history. Several figures in the regime employed astrologers to guide military and political decisions, particularly early in the war. Some reports suggest entire timing units existed within intelligence circles, charting horoscopes of enemy leaders in hopes of predicting their choices. The observatory isn't about space. It's about fate. You descend a small stairwell, into the main room. No telescopes, no star maps. Instead, a single black table with 12 chairs arranged in a circle. In the center, a metal disc etched with zodiac signs arranged around a central gear. The ceiling above is domed, painted with stars, not modern constellations, older ones, faded, misaligned. Someone here believed time could be tracked and bent. Quirky tidbit. According to declassified Allied files, some Nazi officers consulted with astrologers before major operations, including the invasion of the Soviet Union. One such astrologer, Karl Ernst Kraft, was briefly imprisoned, then recruited. His horoscopes were so convincing to some that Hitler allegedly ordered an astrologer purge in 1941, fearing betrayal or manipulation. Historians still argue whether these astrological practices were genuine beliefs or simply tools for psychological comfort and narrative control, but the frequency with which horoscopes appeared in classified memos is hard to ignore. You sit in one of the 12 chairs. It creaks softly, surprisingly intact. The disc in the table center is slightly loose. You spin it. It turns smoothly. Faster than it should, and then slows, pointing not north, but toward a small niche in the wall. You stand, step toward it. Inside is a faded scroll, handwritten. Not typed, and not in German. Greek? No, not quite. Something older. You can't read it, but the symbols feel deliberate, worn by hand, etched with intent. One resembles the spiral again, wider this time, with tiny marks radiating from the center like sun rays. A calendar. A key? You close the niche and turn back. The dome above you glows faintly, stars painted with mica dust catching stray sunlight from a crack in the ceiling, and you realize something odd. There's no clock in this room. No modern timekeeping yet. All just movement. Spirals, circles, cycles. The rhythm of history, maybe, or just the illusion of it. You step outside, blinking into daylight. The sky is pinking at the edges. Evening creeping in. But there's still light enough for one more walk. One more stop. Because there's a final place where whispers cluster thick. A place not just of what the Nazis dreamed, what they feared. And they built it into a mountain. The sun is lower now, trailing gold across the tops of the trees as you move once more into the narrowing woods. This time, the path disappears entirely, swallowed by scrub and shadow and something heavier, more deliberate. You're walking, not on a trail, but into an intent. The mountain ahead isn't tall, But it is patient, and beneath it lies Obersalzberg. Or rather, what's left. Because what the world once called the Eagle's Nest was more than just a scenic retreat. It was a nerve center, a vision, a fortress of fear wrapped in alpine beauty. You crest a final ridge, breath slowing, and there it is. Not the famous tea house perched above the clouds. That was largely ceremonial. You've found the bunkers, carved deep into the mountain, like a clenched fist holding its breath. Mainstream fact: the Obersalzberg complex near Berchtesgaden in southern Germany was a central location for Nazi leadership. Beneath the idyllic facade lay a vast network of tunnels, bunkers, and rooms designed to protect and preserve the most powerful voices of the Third Reich. Hitler's private residence, the Berghof, stood nearby, though Allied bombing in 1945 reduced most of it to ruins. The entrance you step into is barely marked, just a rusted metal hatch wedged open, half covered by rockfall. Inside, the temperature drops immediately. Cool, clean, controlled. These tunnels were made to last, and they have. You walk past abandoned barracks, with beds still bolted to the floor, overturned typewriters, a broken tea set, bulletproof doors that no longer seal. You can still smell something beneath the dust: old perfume, gun oil, memory, quirky tidbit. Some of the rooms deeper in the complex were lined with copper and rubber, not for soundproofing, but for energy insulation. There were whispers that certain chambers were outfitted for experiments in psychological conditioning, possibly through sensory deprivation or sound modulation. None of this has been confirmed, but none of it has been denied with certainty either. Historians still argue whether Hitler himself ever spent significant time in the deepest bunkers here. Most agree his final months were in Berlin, but the symbolism of the mountain retreat lingers. Even today, parts of the complex remain, sealed, either too damaged to enter or simply left that way. You reach a chamber labeled Besprechungsraum, meeting room. Inside, a long table sits untouched, 12 chairs, always 12, a map of Europe on the far wall, faded with time but still visible. You trace your fingers across the borders. How many meetings were held here? How many whispered threats? How many plans scribbled in pencil, then set in motion with ink and gunpowder? There's a small side room, darker, colder, a personal study. The desk inside still has papers pinned beneath a broken lamp. You don't read them. You let them rest. Some things want to be forgotten, even by shadows. But on the desk is something that doesn't fit. A small metal cube. Uranium? No, too light. But carved into it is a familiar shape. A spiral, nested within a triangle. You don't touch it. You just stand beside it. Because you've been seeing this shape everywhere. And now it feels less like a symbol, and more like a signature. You step out of the room and head back toward the surface. Your breath clouds the air. No one speaks here. Even the dust has learned to settle without a sound. Outside, the wind returns. You blink into twilight, the forest below you stretching long and deep. But you know something now. You've walked through myths that were almost real, and realities that wished they were myths. But one question still remains. What were they hiding that scared them? That's where you'll go next. To the files that were never filed. To the documents marked only with silence. The trail that leads down from the mountain isn't a trail at all, just a suggestion. A seam in the trees where footsteps may have passed long ago. You follow it anyway. Because now, the quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels directed, like a hand. On your shoulder, pointing you onward. You emerge from the tree line into a shallow valley. Here, the ground is smoother, less disturbed, more deliberate. There's a structure here, small, almost invisible beneath the ivy and creeping vines. A cottage, a field office. But the lock on the rusted metal door says otherwise. You push. It opens with a sound like history. Exhaling. Welcome to the archives that don't exist. Mainstream fact. Toward the end of the war, the Nazis scrambled to hide, burn, or relocate vast amounts of sensitive documentation. Some was sent deep into mines. Some was hidden in salt caves. Some was simply lost, sealed away in remote structures or buried beneath civilian outposts. The Allies recovered millions of pages after the war and missed just as many. You step inside. The floor is dry, the walls thick. This place was built to preserve. Rows of wooden cabinets, metal lockers, and cardboard boxes crowd the room. Labels have peeled away. Ink has faded, but one symbol remains etched on a cabinet near the back. The spiral. It's been scratched in by hand, not stamped. Someone wanted to mark this one. You open it. Inside, reels of magnetic tape, metal canisters, and file folders tied shut with string. The air smells of iron and mildew and anticipation. You sit down and begin opening the files, not reading, just absorbing. Schematics, photos, maps with no borders. And then, one single memo typed in careful German. It mentions Project Kronos. You pause. You've heard whispers of this before. The time experiment, the alleged attempt to bend chronology itself, not with clocks, but with resonance, vibration, and electromagnetic interference. Quirky tidbit. Project Kronos is one of the most enduring conspiracy theories about Nazi experimentation, said to involve a device or chamber that could slow or dislocate time perception. Project remains completely undocumented in verified archives, and yet sketches resembling tuning forks, spinning chambers, and impossible gyroscopes keep surfacing in black market sales and fringe museums. Coincidence or persistent myth? Historians still argue whether this was an actual research venture or simply a post-war fabrication, part of the mystique surrounding Die Glocke and the broader myth of Nazi wonder weapons. But the name appears just often enough to make you wonder. You flip through more files. Most are routine: transport logs, expense reports, inventory sheets listing copper wire, quartz rods, and strange quantities of mercury. And then you find a photo, not labeled, just filed between reports. It shows a group of 7 men standing around a large bell-shaped device. Their faces are blurred. Intentionally, you can't tell. But the machine looks almost too perfect, like it was made for dreams, not engineering. And in the corner, the spiral again, smaller this time, almost shy. You return the photo to its folder and close the drawer. Something about this place feels satisfied, like the room was waiting for you to visit and is now content to rest again. You step back out into the darkening valley. The stars are beginning to blink above the treetops. No path, no signpost, no compass. But you know where to go. The journey's nearly over, but there's one place left to visit. Not a building, not a lab, not a cave, a crater, and maybe, just maybe, the truth they couldn't bury. The air is thinner now, not from height, but from expectation. You're walking not towards something, but through the afterimage of it. The forest fades behind you, replaced by low hills dusted with grass, rocks scattered like forgotten punctuation. Marks in a sentence the earth is still trying to finish. And ahead, the trees open to reveal a scar, a wide, shallow basin, perfectly round, unnaturally still. You've arrived at the crater, the place where rumor, debris, and mystery all share the same address. There's no plaque here, no warning sign, just a hush that feels like memory. Mainstream fact. Near the end of the war, several unexplained explosions were recorded in remote parts of Eastern Europe. Some attributed them to weapons tests, others to Allied airstrikes that went unreported. But one particular site, now grown over, has long been associated with tales of a failed Nazi experiment gone wrong. A weapon, a machine, or something more abstract? You step carefully across the crater's edge. The ground feels softer, spongier, as if it's still settling decades later. In the center stands a single metal rod, bent and half-buried, the last visible piece of something larger. Around it are stones arranged in a ring, too evenly spaced to be natural, a circle inside a circle. You crouch. The soil here is different, darker, richer, but laced with flecks of black glass, molten, splintered. And under that, a plate of metal, almost smooth, Cold to the touch even after all this time. Etched onto it is, of course, a spiral. You sit back, resting in the hush. This is where Die Glocke might have ended, or begun. Quirky tidbit. According to fringe theories, the bell wasn't just a machine. It was an experiment in space-time manipulation, involving high-speed rotation, liquid, mercury, and electromagnetic fields. Some say it caused sickness. Others say it vanished entirely. A few even believe it reappeared, decades later, somewhere else. The evidence? Dubious. But the stories persist. Historians still argue whether Die Glocke ever existed at all. No official blueprints, no concrete location, no personnel confirmed. But enough references in scattered testimonies and fragmented documents suggest something was being tested. Whether it was science, superstition, or psychological warfare, no one agrees. You walk the rim of the crater slowly, listening. It's not silent here. It hums. Faint. Low. Not mechanical. More like memory with a pulse. You pause near a sunken area in the far corner. There's a torn leather strap buried in the dirt. A buckle. Military style. Still clasped. And beside it, glass shards shaped like a gauge. Whatever happened here didn't go quietly. And maybe it didn't stay. You glance up at the sky. The stars are out now, thick and bright. You find yourself tracing imaginary lines between them. Spirals. Always spirals. You sit at the crater's edge and breathe. Not everything has an answer. Some stories only circle the truth. Like a whisper tracing the rim of a bell, waiting to ring again. The wind rises, soft and steady. You stand, brushing dirt from your palms, and walk out of the crater. Not because the story is over, but because it never truly stops. It loops. And somewhere, beneath another mountain, or behind another sealed vault, the whisper continues, just quiet enough to dream to. The trail away from the crater is neither uphill nor downhill. It just exists. You follow it more by instinct than by sight. Feet soft against packed soil, the stars whispering above like they've been let in on something you're only just beginning to understand. There's a rustle in the leaves, but no wind, only the sound of turning pages, and you realize it's coming from inside your own head. Because now, it's time to visit the ones who watched everything, who took notes, then buried them deeper than bombs. You arrive at a building that doesn't look like much, a nondescript concrete box, moss-covered, with a sagging roof and a rusted air vent that wheezes gently in the night air. But the symbol, etched into the side, a trident wrapped in an eye, tells you otherwise. This was a listening post, for stories no one else was supposed to hear. Mainstream fact: after the war, Allied intelligence agencies, including the OSS, precursor to the CIA and Britain's MI6, collected not just Nazi scientists but documents, devices, and unexplainable artifacts. Operation Paperclip brought researchers into U.S. programs, but lesser-known projects involved analyzing the non-military side of the Third Reich's efforts, rituals, symbols, and high-strangeness experiments that didn't fit neatly on a battlefield. You step inside, and suddenly, it's warm, not from heat, but from memory. Rows of filing cabinets, a projector still pointed at a blank wall, maps with red string long since fallen to the ground. The smell is of dry ink and melted tape. You flick a switch. The lights don't work, but a desk lamp does, powered somehow from a backup generator that groans into life. On the desk is a thick folder labeled only CASE 12A, Unexplained Nazi Assets. You flip it open. Inside, transcripts of interviews with former SS scientists, sketches of a machine powered by lunar phases, a list of recurring numbers found in unrelated locations, 12, 33, 72, and at the bottom, a single typed page. Project Fenrir, details fragmentary. The rest is redacted. Quirky tidbit: Project Fenrir is a rarely mentioned, possibly mythical Nazi venture tied to Norse mythology, supposedly a code name for something vast and uncontrollable. Some claim it was a reference to a prototype weapon, Others say it was a metaphor, a last-ditch belief that the end of the war would bring about a global reset. One soldier wrote that Fenrir was not a project but a person who arrived too early. Historians still argue whether references like this were metaphors, ciphers, or nonsense created to confuse Allied intelligence. But dozens of documents across different archives mention the same words: wolf, spiral, bell, crater. Not enough for answers, just enough for echoes. You sit back in the chair. A tape recorder clicks on without prompt. There's no voice, just static. Then, after a long pause, a single word: zurück. You know enough German by now to translate. Return. To where? The file doesn't say. But your pulse answers for you. Back to the bell. Back to the crater. Back to the moment before it all slipped beneath history's skin. You shut the folder gently. The lamp flickers. The room holds its breath, and you realize something quietly terrifying. The Allies didn't just collect the Nazi experiments. They continued some of them, or at least waited to see if they'd resume themselves. You stand, step out into the cool night air. The stars are higher now, blinking slower, like they know you're listening, like they always have. You leave the listening post behind without turning off the lamp. Let it burn. Let the room remember. The night air curls around your collar, crisp and bracing, carrying the sharp scent of damp stone and pine needles. You walk along a quiet ridgeline now, tracing the edge between known and forgotten, each step tapping out a rhythm older than the maps below. And there, nestled beneath a canopy of silence, stands a small farmhouse. Not from the war. Older, reclaimed, reused. This is where you find the aftermath, the whispers that didn't die, but simply changed uniforms. Inside, the smell of paper overwhelms you. Stacks upon stacks. Folders, memos, rewritten stories. You recognize some of the symbols now. Crossed. Keys, rising suns. Sigils that once meant power, but now feel like echoes. A desk in the corner holds a typewriter still loaded with a sheet of parchment. You press a single key. It types sluggishly. They didn't invent myths. They left them for us. Mainstream fact. In the years following World War II, numerous leads about Nazi technologies, lost vaults, and experimental physics were quietly followed, not just by conspiracy theorists, but by government contractors, military think tanks, and private collectors. The Cold War amplified the secrecy. What began as enemy research became potential assets, if they were real. You thumb through a dusty book left open on the windowsill. It's not a journal, it's a translation guide. One column in German, one in symbols, one blank. Some entries are underlined. Traumglocke, dream bell. Zeitfalte, timefold. Leer capsule, empty capsule. You trace the pages and find doodles in the margins, sketches of circular devices, figures standing in cones of light. Words circled in red, non-linear return. Whatever that means, someone once believed it meant everything. Quirky tidbit. A few fringe theorists believe certain Nazi scientists attempted not just to build weapons, but narratives, deliberate myths seeded into the historical record, timed to activate interest in future decades, like stories engineered to awaken suspicion, fear, or even belief. If true, it would mean the legends themselves are part of the experiment. Historians still argue whether this idea, sometimes called narrative warfare, was ever formalized. But it aligns disturbingly well with certain post-war documents referring to controlled mythos vectors and mimetic destabilization models. Most dismiss it. A few don't. You step outside the farmhouse again, breathing easier. Somehow the world is louder now. The crickets. The breeze. A far-off owl. And behind it all, yes again, the hum. You've heard it so many times now, it no longer feels foreign. It's not a machine. It's the rhythm of the question itself. What were they trying to control? Time, belief, memory. You walk toward the final ridge of the hill. A single tree stands alone at the top, its trunk split in half by lightning long ago, still standing, twisted, stubborn, and tied to one branch. A strip of red cloth, faded, threadbare. You untie it gently. Beneath it, carved into the bark, is a spiral. One final echo. You press your hand against it, and the world goes still. The myths aren't just what they built. They're what they left. Waiting. For someone curious, for someone who walks quietly, for someone like you. The final stretch is quiet. Not the kind of quiet that presses down on your ears, but the kind that opens space around you. The road flattens. The air thickens with dew, and your footsteps soften into the hush. You've followed whispers, trails, symbols and riddles, but here at last, there's no need to search. Just to listen. You step into a clearing where the ground feels unusually even, like it's been cleared, leveled, and then allowed to vanish again beneath grass and moss. A stone bench waits, half sunk into the earth. You sit, and you finally let it settle in. You haven't discovered a machine, or a blueprint, or even a definitive truth, but you have, somehow, found the pattern. It's not about technology. It's about obsession. Mainstream fact. Toward the end of the war, Hitler and his inner circle became increasingly consumed by fringe beliefs, visions of Aryan prehistory, esoteric science, and mythical roots of power. Organizations like the Ahnenerbe searched for Atlantis, relics, and sacred geometry. The goal was never just military victory, it was mythic legitimacy. Control the story, and you control the future. You look up. Stars shimmer above in velvet silence, but something stirs below. You dig gently with your fingers in the soil beneath the bench. Just a few inches down, you touch it. Metal. A box. Tiny. You lift it out. Brush it off. It clicks open. Inside, a scrap of paper, yellowed, brittle, but still legible. It reads simply, "Everything true was first told as myth. No signature, no explanation." But in the bottom of the box, another spiral is etched. Of course it is. Quirky tidbit. A museum in Argentina claims to house a Nazi-era artifact believed to be a prototype, resonance transmitter. Most historians dismiss it as a mislabeled radio part, but the museum director insists it was found near a crash site in 1953, with instructions written in code and spiral diagrams scratched into the copper plating. Historians still argue whether any of this, Die Glocke, crater, the mirror room, was real. But maybe that was always the point. The Nazis wanted to build not just weapons, but myths, because myths last longer than nations, and sometimes they ring truer than facts. You stand. Place the box back in the earth. Let it sleep. As you walk out of the clearing, the wind rises, soft, steady, like the turning of a great wheel. A bell that never stopped humming, just waiting for someone to listen closely enough to hear it. You smile faintly, because now you understand. They didn't try to cheat time. They tried to haunt it. And in that way, they succeeded. You've made it. The walk is over. The files are closed. The mountain sleeps again. Let your breath slow now. Let the stories settle in your chest. Not heavy, not haunting, just quiet. You're sitting somewhere, safe wherever you are, maybe curled beneath a blanket, maybe in a chair, maybe lying on your side listening to the soft hum of a fan. Maybe you hear the tick of a clock or the rustle of curtains. Let that be your rhythm now. Let your mind drift, not away from the story but deeper into it, like diving gently beneath still water, where everything becomes soft and warm and a little unreal. The echoes of the bell grow distant. The spiral stops spinning. The myths fold into your breath, and that hum you've heard, faint and steady, it's just your heartbeat now. No danger, no secrets left to unlock, only rest. Only the story, turning itself off like an old radio, leaving only warmth behind. So close your eyes. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands soften, and let yourself fall. Back through time, back through dreams, back into the quiet where no one chases and nothing needs proving. Not tonight. Tonight you're safe. Tonight you sleep.